Hi, this is my review of 5th edition options. 5th edition options reminds me a lot of those old books for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. They were a series of books known as Player's Options, and they basically contained many different ways in which you could tweak the existing rules for Dungeons and Dragons. You could have different variations for the same rule set, many ways that you could customize or personalize your Dungeons and Dragons experience with them. And 5th edition options is that kind of book. Now, let's talk about the quality of the PDF. The quality is great. You have bookmarks, you have great organization, everything is well written and explained. The only thing that I found like a bit out of place, so to speak, is in the character generation methods. The tic-tac-toe grid method is, I think it's out of place because it's located on the dice pool instead of the grid method section. But everything else is great. You have some very nice illustrations. Some of them are recycled from other Total Party Kill supplements. But the organization is great, and the overall layout is also pretty good. So those of you that have used other supplements from this company will have a pretty comfortable time using this PDF, and newcomers as well will have no trouble at all navigating the entire document. So everything is just great. Now, let's talk about the contents. 5th edition options starts with a very brief and nice introduction on how to use this book. And it even comes with a warning, so if you haven't played Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition for a while, you may want to wait a few sessions before using this supplement, because this is most likely geared towards dungeon masters that have a bit of experience using the system. So they will know the specific rules that they find not too much to their liking and that they think they can modify. So first you have character options. And this has to do with random ability generation methods. Some of these methods are quite nice. So for example, the grid method that I was telling you that looks kind of like a tic-tac-toe. It gives a very streamlined and even fun way on how to generate a character that usually feels a bit powerful in my opinion. And you have other methods, the dice pool method using 24 six-sided dice, the deal with the devil method, which is basically like gambling, so to speak, improved point buy, alternate ability arrays, etc. So this is very good because you can customize a specific generation method for your characters depending on the campaign. So if you want to play like something very low fantasy, you're going to find some methods here to create more realistic, so to speak, player characters. But you want to play something really high fantasy and epic, you're going to find some methods here that will produce almost like superhero type characters in a way of speaking. And you have other details such as racial maximums, variant sizes. So for example, if you want some differences when it comes to armor class and such, depending on size, you can have that as well. And you have how to determine if your character is left-handed or right-handed. You even have a feat that is called left-handed duelist. And details on ability score proficiency, feats at first level, because some players could feel that they are a bit limited in their feat customization rules when using Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. You have details on character flaws, so you can take some flaws for not only to enrich your role-playing experience, but also to get some benefits because of them. And you also have a variant on multi-classing, handling each class that your character has sort of like a simultaneous advancement sort of way, but separated by its unique the abilities of each class. You also have details on variant XP progression. Maybe you feel like things are moving up too fast. You have methods to tweak experience when in terms of advancements, if you're playing a low fantasy campaign, epic fantasy, etc. And you have details on ability score increases by level, not class. And how to handle character wealth, improve saving throws, and such. In chapter 2 you have skills. Now I think this section will be of great use or utility for those dungeon masters that want a bit more customization in terms of focused character specializations. That is, in more simplified terms, to have a greater variety of skills rather than having like a universal value to different things. So if you're a fan of old school type of Dungeons and Dragons that had a lot of skills so that each character felt like he had a profession before adventuring and such, you're going to find all the details here with information on Arcana, Athletics, Deception. The list is quite extensive. I can imagine that some players that like to simplify most mechanical aspects of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, won't like this section as much, but for those of you that want a lot of detail and specialization when it comes to what a character can do in out-of-combat situations and even inside of combat at times, this section is going to be of your liking. You can have some more definition when it comes to complex skill checks and tool-related complex skill checks as well. So if you have like different types of tools and gear, this section is going to contain all the details for that. And then you have chapter 3, which is basically about equipment, with a simpler system of mundane crafting and details on hindering armor, simpler ammunition, masterwork equipment, exotic equipment, poison handling, etc. These are basically like small tweaks, nothing too radical. That is just to make some small changes so that you feel like equipment creation is a bit more suited to your style of gaming. And then you have combat, and this section I really like. You have different ways in which how to handle hit points and healing. Perhaps you want a grittier and more deadly style of game. You could use slower healing, and you have details on fatiguing injuries, lingering injuries, limited recovery per hour. You also have details on how to handle armor differently, because some players prefer a more like damage mitigation method when they receive blows, and they don't think that the current armor class system is too realistic in a sense. So you have a system here to handle armor sort of like damage mitigation method. And you have details on different conditions like bleeding, blinded. You also have a new feat, blind fighting. You have details on being charmed or confused, paralyzed. You also have variance to initiative. So you could roll each round, or you have like a round table initiative. Alternate initiative methods based on different roles and stats, etc. You also have variant combat actions, variants for bull rush, for charge attacks, disarm, giving ground, overbearing. You also have multiple disadvantages and advantages, and better critical hits, such as critical damage to equipment, harsher critical hits. They put a lot of emphasis on customizing that battle experience so that you could have an experience that feels more like a sword and sorcery and something just quite modern and high fantasy. You also have details on more opportunity attacks, simplified speed factor. Overall, the combat section is quite impressive in my opinion, because it isn't that big. There aren't many 2 pages, but in those pages they managed to cover almost everything that could arise in a dungeon master's mind as to, oh, how can I make combat more real, or how can I make it more over the top. You'll find all the details right here. And you have a section on magic, concerning everything from magic items identification, crafting magical items and limits within crafting, attunement using magical foci, variant concentration methods, bonus spellcasting slots, spell recharging. And this is another great section, that is a Game Master's Miscellany. And here a Dungeon Master is going to find details on, for example, you want to have like a sort of like a Call of Cthulhu game. You can have that here with fear checks, Doom, And this also works quite well. For example, if you had like a lot of old school Ravenloft supplements and modules and such, you could use the system here when it comes to fear checks. If you don't like the darkness and madness methods presented in the old school Ravenloft modules, you can use this system. You have details on experience tokens if you want to handle it like that. Better inspiration, that is, inspiration can be granted to do more than just grant advantage. It can be used in many different ways if the game master allows it. So you have things such as heroic inspiration that gives bonuses, swift inspiration, stalwart inspiration, etc. You also have different ways in which to tweak alignments. And you also have non-player character classes, and this comes directly from Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition. Do you remember the like the expert, the spellcaster, the warrior, etc.? So that if you have like an NPC that tags along or maybe appears like an enemy, you have a very quick way on how to generate NPC classes with this. Well, overall, let me tell you what I think of this 5th edition option supplement. I can only think of a few players that will not like this supplement. That is, those players that think that Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition is already too complex for them, or that it has enough depth, will not like this, because this adds a bit more depth and complexity. And those players that, for example, already have a lot of the other Dungeons and Dragons editions and have been adding or converting material from those editions to Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, well, I don't think you will find many new things here. You could be surprised with a few elements, but you will probably have some similar things. But for those that are newcomers for Dungeons and Dragons, especially 5th edition, and for those that don't have the time to convert material that has appeared in other editions and splat books and such, this is a great supplement. I'm also quite impressed. For example, we have campaign templates at the end of the book. So if you want to have like a high fantasy campaign, they give you a list of all the modifiers, variants, rules, ways that you can tweak the rules, customize, add and take away from your game to have a high fantasy campaign. And you also have details on low fantasy campaigns, gritty campaigns, horror campaigns. So this really saves you a lot of time. So maybe you want, I want to play a campaign that feels sort of like a science, a fantasy in space. So you could go, I'll take a look at the high fantasy section, but there are also some horrible alien monsters there. Okay, I'll look at the horror section. And you have all the list that has the information to modify your campaign for that specific gaming experience. So I would recommend this to those who have just started playing 5th edition, and for those that are interested in tweaking and playing around with the rules to find the perfect Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition experience. You could also use a lot of the things here in other old school Renaissance games, Labyrinth Lord, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea. This is useful for that as well. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.